The Omnitank meta is back and stronger than ever, but there are now hundreds of Omnitank options in the game. So that's why in today's tier list I'll be ranking 132 Omnitanks from triple S all the way down to D. Now any hero can technically be an Omnitank by slapping distant counter or close counter on them. Because of that, I will only be ranking heroes with preference weapons. I will not be considering arcane weapons in the builds, and I will only be ranking heroes whose main role, or one of their main roles, is Omnitanking. Also, armors will not be on this list as they have their own save tier list that goes over their tanking options. But with that said, armors can be Omnitanks in the right situation. I constructed this tier list by running over 3,000 sims and tests, using my own experience as a highly ranked player, as well as talking to other rank 1 ether raids, summoner duels, and tier 21 arena players. Each hero on this list was also ranked based off 4 categories: defensive prowess, weaknesses, damage, and lastly utility, with defensive prowess and weaknesses having the biggest focus as this is a tank tier list. Now let's quickly go over each category and what it entails. Let's start off with the most important category, defensive prowess. Defensive effects are effects that ensure Omnitanks can survive fight after fight. These are effects that can reduce damage or remove weaknesses. Some examples are true or flat damage reduction, normal damage reduction, miracle effects, or even just a tanky stat line. The second most important category is weaknesses. The number of weaknesses a hero has drastically reduces how effective they can be as an Omnitank, and based off the meta-specific weaknesses can be even worse than others. Some examples of weaknesses are damage reduction piercing, effective damage, sweep effects like dazzling staff or wind sweep, and even being outsped. There are essentially 2 main types of Omnitanks: bulky Omnitanks who focus on defense and resistance, and speed Omnitanks who utilize their speed to avoid doubles and reduce damage. Speed Omnitanks are speed dependent, as their name implies, so if they can't outspeed their opponents, they essentially go shields down and get destroyed. The third most important category is damage. This may seem a bit out of place, but Omnitanks need to be able to secure kills on enemies. An enemy that survives can be danced or even enable Wings of Mercy for another unit on the enemy team, so damage is an essential part of a good Omnitank. The damage category includes offensive stat line and any effect that can help secure kills, like true damage, a brave attack, or even effective damage. The final category is versatility. This category is the least required, but it is the thing that allows Omnitanks to stand out amongst their peers. These are effects that can offer support to allies, effects that make the unit unique, or even effects that can offer value in specific game modes like Arena or Ether Raids. The final thing before we jump into the first tier, I will not be going over every single hero on the tier list in depth as this video would last forever, but I will be doing so for the higher tiers as well as some of the more unique heroes in the lower tiers. Let's get started at the bottom with D tier. D tier is full of heroes who underperform for a plethora of reasons, such as bad stat lines, bad preference weapons, or even bad movement types like Cavalry. A great example of this is a hero like Sayri, who has a conditional distant counter weapon based off her HP. This means that if Sayri doesn't meet the HP condition of 50%, she loses distant counter and she becomes a sitting duck. Another example are the OG Cav Omnitanks and Camus and Xander. Unfortunately, these heroes have outdated weapons, bad stat lines, and because they are Cavalry, are heavily restricted by skill inheritance. I'm probably going to say this a ton throughout the video, but these heroes aren't unusable by any means, but they do need arcane weapons. In C tier, we have heroes who can Omnitank well with a lot of support. But they are all lacking in a few different ways, such as a bad PRF weapon, a weapon that doesn't synergize with the current meta skills, or in several units' cases, they are waiting for the refine. I think C tier is the perfect place for arcane weapons, as the majority of these units do have good stat lines, but their weapon needs some big help. Some examples of units like this are Mia, who has great speed, but her PRF weapon is just really old and outdated. Or an old school fan favorite, Noe, whose weapon has definitely fallen off in the current meta, where debuffs are a good thing thanks to Legendary Robin, and having negative slaying is really bad. The last type of unit in here are newer units who don't have the best PR weapons when it comes to Omnitanking, like Gregor, who causes a ton of debuffs, which is really bad in the current meta thanks to Legendary Robin and how prevalent Unity has become. B tier is where we have a ton of solid tanks who have unique niches that can make them stand out, but they do have a major weakness that holds them back from being top tier. Now I already know I'm going to get a ton of hate for having the Ikes in this tier, in particular Legendary Ike, but I think he is the perfect example to demonstrate the rising power of built-in distant counter. For a long time, having distant counter built into your weapon was a huge negative, as it took up almost the entire weapon's effect and also doomed the unit to a bad refine. But in the current meta, it's extremely powerful, and that's for one reason: Legendary Robin. Having distant counter in your weapon means that the hero's A skill is open for a Unity skill, which means they can Unity stack alongside Legendary Robin. Currently, Unity stacking is ridiculously broken, and all these units of B tier with distant counter in the weapon, such as the Ikes, the Ryomas, Priam, Yenfei, and even Sothis, can be very powerful Omnitanks thanks to the power of Unity. Here are some of the results of Sims for Legendary Ike with just a -6 attack and speed debuff and Robin support, against +10s of many of the best nukes in the entire game. Now obviously Sims are never perfect, but this should give you an idea of how powerful this effect can be. The reason these units aren't higher on the tier list is because it does require Legendary Robin, which is very restrictive as Robin is only available during Earth Season for Ether raids. And these units still have a lot of weaknesses such as Brave attacks and DR piercing. Moving past that, we also have some dragons and flyers in this tier, but I will talk about those archetypes a bit more later. What I want to focus on is the beast units. After years of neglect, beast units are finally getting some love with the introduction of Beast Sense 4, which finally gives them some inheritable damage reduction. This allows many of the better infantry beasts to act as Omnitanks, though they still have major weaknesses such as beast effective weapons and also not having access to the best Omnitank specials in the form of Vital Astra or Godlike Reflexes. On the other hand, we also have several beast cavalry units here as well, who thanks to their weapons can stack a considerable amount of damage reduction, but just like the other beast units are weak to damage reduction piercing. Even so, this is a big boon for beast units, and hopefully in the near future we can get a beast special to further help them out. Okay, let's move on to A tier, and this is where things get really interesting. As you may have noticed, there are a lot of different types of units in this tier, and that's thanks to the powerful new skill inheritances we've gotten recently. Every unit in A tier can be fantastic Omnitanks, but they all have at least one major weakness that holds them back, or their weapons are lacking an effect or two, which does make them a bit weaker than the competition. The first thing I have to talk about is the Flyer Emergence. That's right, flying units can actually beat tanks now. This is a ridiculously exciting change even from the beginning of this year, where most flyers just could never make the cut. This is all thanks to one skill, Guard Bearing 4. Guard Bearing 4 has allowed these flyers to get a ton of damage reduction. Personally, I still think their best roles are melee tanks, but they definitely can't Omnitank with the right support or builds. The first flyer I really want to talk about is Har. Har got a great refine last year that granted him a Brave weapon, Guard, IO's Shield, and most importantly, flat damage reduction. Guard Bearing 4 was the final puzzle piece to make Har into a ridiculous hero who can survive quads from some of the best nukes in the entire game. The best part is, he isn't weak to bows, which really pushes up his survivability and also lets him run more optimal builds. The blue mage weakness he gained isn't really a big deal overall. Har's biggest weakness though, and the reason why he isn't higher up in the tier list, is his ability to secure kills. He does have a Brave weapon that allows him to destroy the more squishy nukes in the meta, but once he runs into damage reduction, he can struggle as he doesn't have a way to get past it. And he also doesn't have Slaying to help him proc specials reliably. You're definitely going to want to bring a special acceleration support like Na, Brave Lucina, or even Legendary Hinoka to help him out. Now a flying unit who's in the opposite boat is our free-to-play god, Summer Shez. Shez is one of the best free-to-play units we've ever received, and he absolutely can shred through opponents with his Brave weapon with 20% speed-based true damage. And thanks to his built-in Canto remaining +1, he can even engage, kill problematic foes, and then Canto back into position. Now, while Har struggles with killing, Shez can struggle with surviving, even with Guard Bearing 4 due to his bow weakness, which is the most common weakness for these flying Omnitanks. You can run the IO's Shield seal to fix this, but it will hurt the hero's overall stat line, especially in the case of flyers who are reliant on speed. Another amazing flying tank is Chloe, who is fast, gets flat damage reduction, and true damage based off of resistance, and even guard. She can definitely be a fortress in the air with the right supports, though she still does have the bow weakness and is also reliant on her allies to keep her effects active. I won't go into detail for the rest, but they are all fantastic for their own reasons, and are definitely not units to underestimate just because they are flyers. The other two units I am required to talk about are Brave Tiki and Freya. Brave Tiki unfortunately had a rough start on release and hasn't aged the best. She definitely can be a powerful bulky Omnitank, but she has considerable weaknesses such as Dragon Effectiveness, Null Follow-Up, Brave attacks, and damage reduction piercing. What makes things worse, of course, is the fact she goes power crept twice by herself. Definitely not a bad hero by any means, but her considerable weakness keeps her from being any higher on this tier list. When it comes to Freya, I have gotten a ridiculous amount of pushback on how bad I think her refine is, but Freya just cannot compete at the highest tiers of Omnitanking. This is mostly due to the fact she cannot receive mythic buffs as a mythic unit herself, which means she's losing out on a considerable amount of effective HP. She also has no way to stop damage reduction piercing or halving, which means one good Deadeye, lethality, or just a hero running the tier 4 no follow-up skills can easily take her out, or cripple her so much that she'll die in the next combat. Freya really needs a beast godlike reflexes or something of that sort to help her out, but until then, Freya will remain in A tier. Another mythic I want to discuss as an Omnitank is Asker. Asker does share several weaknesses with Freya, such as the inability to use mythic buffs, but he does have some nice advantages such as having flat damage reduction that he can stack alongside normal damage reduction similar to Brave Dimitri. In particular, Asker makes great use of Null Counter Disrupt 4, removing his sweep weakness, and also the new Counter Roar 4 from Brave Corrin. Asker is quite weak to Null follow-up effects, but Counter Roar can give Asker a ton of power, so he can retaliate and one-shot most opponents. Even so, Asker does have several weaknesses that do hold him back, but if you're a major Asker fan like I am, then he is definitely usable. It's time to talk about the new kid on the block, Brave Robin. As a disclaimer, I want to say I've only tested Brave Robin, as he just released a few days before this video has come out, so it is possible that I've overlooked some insane build for him, but as of now, I am very confident in saying that Brave Robin's main role isn't meant to be an Omnitank, but instead a support nuke. Even so, Brave Robin can be a good Omnitank due to his solid speed if you want to play him in that role, though it may take a bit of skill inheritance to change up his build. Robin's main claim to fame is Tip the Scales, which gives out the Rally Spectrum buff, allowing Robin to not only get plus 8 to all stats just from his C slot, but also a special jump effect similar to Duo Ike. This synergizes well with Robin's entire kit that wants to use high cooldown specials in particular, such as Bonfire and Ignis. While this does offer Robin some great power in that it gives damage reduction piercing and adaptive damage with his specials, it also restricts him from using several of the more powerful damage reduction sources that Omnitanks have been relying on, such as Battle Astra, or Godlike Reflexes, or even Speed Smoke 4. Overall, Brave Robin can be a powerful Omnitank, but does struggle due to limited damage reduction stacking and his big weakness to damage reduction piercing. Now we step into S tier, and this is where the discussion becomes much more nuanced. All of these heroes are very good Omnitanks, and in the correct situation and with the correct support, they can be top tier. But the situations can be restrictive, mostly due to their weapon effects or effects they are missing. Flame Lyn is the best example of this. Flame Lyn is a ridiculously powerful Omnitank with a ton of true damage, a whopping 48 stats just from her A skill, godlike reflexes cycling to protect her from damage reduction piercing, and even guard to help her protect her from specials. But there is one massive caveat. Flame Lyn can only Omnitank in summer duels, during the Might of Myriad season 2. Because her preference skill takes up the A slot, and currently we don't have a distant counter seal for non-dragons, she just isn't able to do it anywhere else. So even though Flame Lyn can be godly, this major weakness keeps her from being a top tier Omnitank. One of the most surprising units in this tier list has to be Duo Alm. I think a majority of people read his refine and they completely forgot he existed. But Duo Alm is a very powerful Omnitank, and this comes down to something I haven't discussed at all much: speed creep. Many of the heroes who are in lower tiers are there because they cannot keep up with the ridiculous speed creep happening in the meta. So many units just get ridiculous amounts of free speed from their weapons, like Brave Gulveg, Summer Shamir, etc. And Duo Alm is actually one of these heroes as well. He can get an uncapped amount of speed and attack based off 25% of the foe's defense, and he can also reduce the foe's defense and attack equal to 25% of their resistance. Combine that with the Dull All effect cancelling out visible bonuses, and plus 8 to all stats from his weapon, and you have a massive stat pool. Alm's biggest weakness will be damage reduction piercing, as he can't reliably run godlike reflexes, but even so, I think Duo Alm is definitely being slept on at the moment. If there was ever a hero that made me salty to talk about, it has to be Echidna. Half jokes aside, Echidna got an absolutely absurd refine that has made her into one of the best free-to-play Omnitanks in the entire game. Remember how I was talking about Unity stacking earlier? Well, Echidna gets Omni Unity in her weapon, so she can easily double stack Unity, giving her a ridiculous amount of stats. But she also gets a powerful Ice Mirror effect, allowing her to reflect damage back at her foes, and even some nice extra healing. Echidna's major weakness is her lack of slaying, which means godlike reflexes is very unreliable on her, even with support, so she doesn't have a good way to get around damage reduction piercing. Even so, Echidna is a fantastic unit, especially when you consider you can get merges for her just for the low price of feathers. Witch Corn is essentially a powered version of Legendary Corn before she got her eventual refine. She has a kit that synergizes extremely well with Negating Fang, allowing her a way to get around damage reduction piercing, and she even gets 8 flat damage reduction when her special triggers. Most notably, as a dragon, Corn can run distant counter in her seal slot. Though it does come at the price of speed, in the steal slot, which can definitely hurt her because she is so dependent on speed to not get doubled. Corrin's biggest problem are that she is weak to dragon effective weapons, brave attacks can allow the enemy to get past negating Fang, and she doesn't have access to all the skill inheritance options that sword, lance, and axe infantries have access to. This can limit her options for a B slot, which overall does lower the amount of damage reduction she can get, as well as how much speed she can stack. Next up is Diamant, and I made an entire video exploring Omnitanks and their future evolutions because of this hero. If you haven't yet, go check it out. I'll leave a link in the description. So I'm not going to go into super detail about Diamant here, but overall Diamant is a very unique hero who can pack a considerable punch, but also can take a lot of damage due to not being able to stack damage reduction. This means Diamant requires heavy investment to be at his peak. He needs as many merges, dragon flowers, and support as possible so he can stay within that 25 speed range to deny the opponent's doubles and then blow them up in retaliation. At max investment, Diamant can be a very powerful Omnitank, but without it, he can definitely struggle. The hero who helped to revitalize Omnitanks is up next. Ascended Merida introduced Vital Astra, completely changing the Omnitank game and was the first step to their current dominance. Ascended Merida herself is a very solid Omnitank who focuses on looping Vital Astra. This allows her to stack a lot of damage reduction while also putting out solid damage. Merida's biggest problem is that she doesn't get much speed from her weapon, which can cause her to fall prey to the rampant speed creep. Also, a lot of her weapon budget is in no follow-up, which is easily accessible by outside support, so she would really prefer a different effect. Speaking of Merida, up next is Base Merida, the unit who introduced speed-based damage reduction itself. Base Merida got a very solid refine that fixed some of her major problems, such as outspeeding opponents, guard, and even securing kills. Overall, she got a big update that has made her into a very solid Omnitank. Brave Marth drops into S tier, and this is before his refine. He'll be getting next month, so there is a very high chance he moves up from this position. Brave Marth is a very interesting hero as he is part Omnitank and part Vantage unit. In good situations, Marth can one-shot opponents before they even get a chance to touch him. And thanks to the introduction of Special Spiral 4, he can even pierce damage reduction, which was one of the biggest problems he used to struggle with. Some things that do hold back Marth is that he has to choose between Special Spiral 4 to secure kills or speed-based damage reduction in his B slot, which means he can't have a big hardy bearing weakness. Also, Marth is reliant on his allies being buffed with visible bonuses in order to make his weapon work, which can be an annoying hoop to jump through. Hopefully Marth's refine fixes these problems and makes him more powerful than ever. Byleth was one of the top tier Omnitanks during their original period of dominance before the evil known as Duolith arrived, and after their refine, Byleth has once again become a very powerful Omnitank. Creator Sword has two powerful effects in the form of full no follow-up and full tempo, but with their refine, Byleth has gained damage reduction alongside damage reduction piercing, and when you combine all these effects together, you get a deadly godsword whose specials can't be stopped. This means Byleth can run Vital Astra and deal massive damage while stacking damage reduction, and the full tempo cannot be underestimated as many newer nukes are relying on special acceleration to get their lethalities or deadeyes off, and tempo shuts that down. Next up is a unit that is completely slept on, New Year's Ashe. Ashe is one of our best bulky Omnitanks, and this is due to her strong power to secure kills with her Brave effect, her built-in 40% damage reduction, and her follow-up denial. And similar to Byleth, thanks to being a beast infantry, she gets full tempo as well. The key skill that really lets Ashe pop off though is No Counter Disrupt 4. This makes it so that whoever attacks into Ashe is going to have to eat a double in retaliation, and typically with a bonfire attached to the last hit. This makes Ashe hit extremely hard, and not many enemies can survive with that much power. New Year's Ashe's biggest weakness though is Brave attacks, especially alongside DR Piercing, or Halving, as she won't get a chance to kill the enemy. But you also can't forget that Ashe also offers some great support thanks to the warping of Opening Retainer, which overall makes Ashe a fantastic unit in several different game modes. Our final hero in S tier is gonna be Winter Altina. Winter Altina is just like her mythic counterpart, but unfortunately she doesn't have access to her preference A skill, but in return she does get access to a plethora of infantry locked skills. What has really skyrocketed Winter Altina in the Omnitank charts is two things. First, Winter Altina is a distant counter hero, which means she can unity stack like I mentioned earlier. This is ridiculously strong when you consider she has a Brave effect in her weapon and a DR Piercing special. But the second big thing is the introduction of No Counter Disrupt 4, which not only gave Altina more stats, but also a way to gain damage reduction while still being able to counter against sweep effects. Winter Altina is easily one of the most deadly units in the game, but she does have a major weakness against Brave attacks and damage reduction piercing, which can be quite common thanks to Bronocatria. We have reached double S tier. These heroes are very powerful and perform well in many situations, though they do have a weakness or a hoop they need to jump through to perform optimally. First up, let's talk about the thickest dragon, Base Rhea. Typically, slow Omnitanks have suffered in the past due to their big weakness to no follow-up, which can stop them from securing kills or denying doubles. And Rhea still does struggle with no follow-up, but she has gotten some very powerful toys to make up for it. Rhea's biggest change from an armored hero to an infantry is the plethora of skills she can now use, in particular ×4, which can allow Rhea to run Iceberg consistently, which makes it much easier for her to secure kills due to the massive damage Iceberg can offer. She also has a guaranteed follow-up attack, which can let her double, unlike Fallen Rhea, who restricted herself to a single hit. But what really makes Rhea stand out is that she can stack a ton of damage reduction, but she also gets flat damage reduction against follow-up attacks. This is massive, as Rhea has a scowl effect that can turn off pre-charged specials, which helps to ensure the DR piercing special goes off on the second hit where the flat DR can't be pierced. This makes Rhea into a very bulky tank to cut through, while also giving her a few avenues to secure kills. Speaking of dragons, next up is the power creeper herself, Ascended Tiki. Essentially, Ascended Tiki faces a majority of the weaknesses Brave Tiki has. She's fast, so she doesn't have to worry about no follow-up. She still has built-in scowl to shut down pre-charged specials, so it lets her DR doesn't get pierced as easily, and she even gets a ton of AoE damage reduction as well. Ascended Tiki is the premier fast dragon Omnitank and is pretty annoying to deal with. Ascended Fur is one of our newest god swords, which to be fair, we have a lot of. What makes Fur stand out as a god sword is their built-in anti-guard, built-in ×4 effect, free damage reduction, and most notably, the immense amount of speed she can get for free. As a speed-based god sword, she can reliably win speed checks while also ensuring Vile Astra is always charged. This allows Fur to do a ton of damage while also stacking damage reduction. Fur essentially is just an improved Ascended Marita overall, and as boring as that is, it's also quite good. Alear is one of our more unique god swords, as she can not only act as a powerful Omnitank, but she can also be deadly with her insane threat range due to her built-in charge buff, but she can also share with her support partner. Alear is the full package of effects, including slaying, up to 17 speed, and even stackable damage reduction built into her weapon. Alear is one of the fastest god swords, which is a big selling point with the amount of speed creep we're currently getting. But the biggest selling point for Alear has to be her charge support, as it can make her and her chosen ally into deadly threats in game modes like Summoner Duels, and also give Alear staying power, as at the very least, she will always have this unique support. Throughout this video, I've been talking about the power of Unity stacking. It allows old units like Legendary Ike or Ryoma to perform extremely well, and even transform free-to-play units like Echidna into a monster. There is one hero who takes Unity stacking to a whole new level, and that is Fallen Ike. Fallen Ike had fallen off quite a bit due to the fact he required the enemy team to run debuffs for him to be truly effective, which wasn't always reliable. But the introduction of Legendary Robin completely changed that. Now Ike can always have the debuffs he needs, but also he can stack 3 layers of Unity, and Panic only makes him stronger. I really don't think people understand how many stats Ike can really get here. Here's an example where Ike gets plus 43 attack, plus 72 speed, 30 defense, and even 59 resistance. And this wasn't even in an optimal situation. Unity is easily the most powerful effect in the current meta, so even though Fallen Ike does have major weaknesses, such as sweeps or AoEs, when you have that many stats, it just doesn't matter that much. Fallen Ike can easily be the fastest god sword in the entire meta by a large margin. That being said though, Fallen Ike obviously has to jump through several hoops to perform this optimally. He needs Legendary Robin, who is restricted to Earth Season, and he also really wants to have the highest visible stats on the entire team, so he soaks all the shrines, chills, and whatever other debuffs the enemy can throw at you. And because of those restrictions, Ike can't go further than double S tier, though maybe in the future, when he gets to Refine, he will be able to. Especially if somehow Unity hasn't been nerfed into the ground by then. Up next is my boy, the long-awaited arrival, Felix. Now Felix is the god of specials. This dude just keeps his special charged all the time, no matter what, which is really strong when you consider he has access to godlike reflexes, which counters one of Godsword's most common problems, damage reduction piercing. It also grants speed-based true damage, which can drastically help to secure kills. Felix also has access to a lot of stackable damage reduction to work alongside godlike reflexes, such as 30% from his weapon, 50% from a tier 4B skill, and he can even run Speed Smoke for some help after the first engagement. Now the reason Felix isn't higher is because he still has some of the common Godsword weaknesses, such as being outsped. Felix isn't slow, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, but his weapon only gives plus 10 speed, which in our current speed creep meta isn't always enough. He also can be vulnerable to brave attacks, which are prevalent thanks to Katria. The final unit in double S tier is the queen of the meta, Altina. I'm sure many people think of Altina solely as a Vantage unit, and she is an excellent one, but thanks to the damage reduction of Sheriff's Chosen Plus and Guard Bearing 4, Altina doesn't even need to rely on Vantage all the time. She can just take hits and then destroy the enemy. Altina is easily one of the most powerful Omnitanks when it comes to securing kills, thanks to her brave weapon with true damage, dual attack defense, and of course Twin Blades that lets her slice right through damage reduction. Altina is a fantastic unit in Ether Raids, but where she shines the most currently is Summoner Duels. In SD, Altina has two major options. First, go complete Raid Boss and be a ridiculous Omnitank that challenges the entire enemy team 1v5, or she can act as a support Omnitank, thanks to the introduction of Guidance 4 and Soaring Guidance. This allows Altina to protect her squishy friends from deadly melee threats, while also allowing them to warp in to destroy the enemy team. This makes Altina easily one of the best Omnitanks and Raid Bosses in the current SD meta. We have finally arrived at triple S tier, and with it the 5 best Omnitanks in the current meta. These units are the premier Omnitanks who have few weaknesses and a ton of strengths. These units are absolutely busted and can take on a majority of the meta with a bit of help. What if I told you, when I started making this tier list, Legendary Seliph was at the bottom of D tier alongside Xander and Camus? Well, somehow Seliph has gotten a god tier refine that has skyrocketed him to the very top. He is easily the best cavalry tank in the entire game, and there's no real competition. What makes Seliph such a standout is that he overcomes all the common weaknesses of slow Omnitanks. Typically, no follow-up can shut down guaranteed follow-up attacks. Well, Seliph has a brave weapon. Slow tanks can struggle to secure kills. Seliph has attack-based true damage on top of a brave weapon. Sweep typically can stop counterattacks completely. Seliph has no counter disrupt. Brave effects can tear through bulky units. Seliph has an emergency button miracle and can even heal up to 8 HP per hit. Now I don't want you to think Seliph is unbeatable, he can definitely struggle against things like AoEs, and his miracle is only once per turn, so he can't get smashed back to back or he will die. But even so, there are ways to fix Seliph's major weaknesses, such as Goto removing his AoE weakness, and support units like Eliwood or Legendary Robin providing Seliph with even more bulk, so he doesn't proc his miracle as easy. And that's not even considering his 40 to 80% damage reduction and the fact that he can quad against units who don't deny his follow-up attack. Legendary Seliph is the surprise of the year, and I couldn't be happier to see him destroy the meta. Another one of our new god swords, Fallen Byleth, has proven to be one of the most powerful. She essentially showed up and stole Brave Mart's niche of being a Vantage Omnitank. But honestly, she just does it way better. Byleth's real power comes in the form of her speed-based Vantage in her weapon, combined with her preference special, Divine Pulse. Divine Pulse grants Byleth a ton of power to secure kills, while most importantly, giving her non-pierceable damage reduction. This makes it so Byleth isn't afraid of Deadeyes or lethalities, and that's only if they can survive her Divine Pulse to begin with. Byleth also has a built-in Bulwark, meaning she can protect her support partners from harm, while also healing up any damage she does take. Byleth's one major weakness is Hardy Bearing, as it will stop her from getting the non-pierceable DR from Divine Pulse, which can result in her death if the foe hits hard enough. Even so, Fallen Byleth is a ridiculously powerful Omnitank who can pack a serious punch. Here is your True Legends king, Brave Dimitri. Brave Dimitri's refine transformed him from a 0 to a hero. Brave Dimitri is the unit who won't die, and best of all, he's only gotten stronger with time. You probably already know this, but what makes Dimitri so strong is that he can stack normal damage reduction on top of his 20% defense-based flat damage reduction. This can drastically reduce damage often, even making it ping for 0. Brave Dimitri is one of the few Omnitanks who can just plant himself in front of a catcher ball and watch units explode when they bounce off of him. The coolest thing about Brave Dimitri is that he now has multiple builds that can perform extremely well. You can go for the typical bulky defense build where you focus completely on reducing damage as much as possible. And because he has built-in distant counter, you can even unity stack Dimitri alongside Robin. And the best part is, he comes with attack defense unity, so you don't even have to fodder for it. The other option is to go for Speed Brave Dimitri. This option does make him a bit more fragile, but it gives him additional flat damage reduction through godlike reflexes, makes him less dependent on his guaranteed follow-up attack as you can give him no follow-up support, and he's fast. But most importantly, it synergizes well with no counter disrupt 4, which removes Dimitri's weakness to sweep effects. The major weakness with this build is being outsped though, as that will turn off godlike reflexes, and because you have invested in speed, you will overall have less defense and resistance. Either way though, Brave Dimitri is easily one of the best Omnitanks in the entire game, and there are a ton of great supports he can use depending on which build you choose to go. Summer Fjorm has hit the beach running. This new God Sword is just ridiculous. First of all, she has a built-in ranged no counter disrupt, meaning she can easily counter and take out a ton of meta nukes like Legendary Alm or Legendary Hinoka. She also gets a massive speed boost from her weapon, which can grant up to 15 speed. She also has Guard to shut down enemy specials, and we haven't even discussed her most disgusting skill, her preference special, Frostbite Mirror, which gives Fjorm anywhere from 10 to 30% non-pierceable damage reduction, an Ice Mirror effect that reflects damage back at the foe, and the most insane thing, Distant Counter. That's right, Distant Counter in a special. You want to see power creep? Here it is. All these effects allow Fjorm to be a ridiculously fast and safe God Sword, and if that wasn't enough, she can even Unity stack alongside Legendary Robin if she wants to. Fjorm realistically only has two major weaknesses, because being outsped for her isn't the easiest thing to do. Her first one is melee sweepers, as her weapon doesn't offer null counters disrupt against melee units, and the second is brave attacks, as the first hit will eat up her special, and the second one can possibly take her out if they can get past her normal damage reduction. With that said, Summer Fjorm is just completely stupidly busted and can excel in essentially every single game mode. Our final triple S Omnitank is going to be the one and only Lucia. Lucia is the definition of a cheating unit. Unlike any other unit in the game, Lucia just turns off foundational effects. You want to use a special? Too bad, they don't exist anymore. You want advantage? Nope, she is Hardy Bearing. You want to use a sweep effect? Too bad, she has no counter disrupt. Want to get help from your friends? Well, all your drives are turned off. You thought standing on that fancy defensive terrain was going to help you? Nope, that's gone too. On top of all that, she also gets full no follow-up, 20% speed-based true damage, and even 30% damage reduction. Lucia literally just turns off a majority of her weaknesses, which is just completely ridiculous. There are two ways to counter Lucia: outspeed her, which shouldn't happen with proper support from units like Legendary Robin or Ellie would, or you can use a tier 4 no follow-up skill, which are still very premium and rare. Overall, Lucia is just a cheating God Sword who literally changes the rules of the game. And with that, my ultimate Omnitank tier list is complete. All 132 Omnitanks ranked from triple S to D. I would love to hear your opinions in the comment section down below. Let me know what you agree with and what you don't, and make sure to let me know who your favorite Omnitank is. As always, I'd like to thank my members for all their constant support. This video took months to make, so I hope it helps you out and you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, and if you really want to support the channel, join as a member down below. This has been Oblivion, I'll catch you all later.